So as you can see, we're going to last topic here, age of exploration, the age of discovery. Anyway, this is all happening, overlapping with one another. I know even chapter one, right? We kind of went back in time here at the start of this chapter. And it is what it is at this point, but there's a lot going on here right around this time, during this Renaissance, this Reformation, the age of discovery. There's so much happening, right? To say we're going to cover every little aspect too, we just simply won't. Yeah, I'll mention it, but at the same time, okay, we'll mention a lot of the direction of these countries trying to expand their influence, expand their power. Right? We left off though talking about the Renaissance here. Who controlled really the trade through the Mediterranean Sea? Who controlled a lot of this influence here when it came to the Renaissance to the rest of Europe? What was it? Play that. Italy, yeah, good job. Even though Italy wasn't Italy just yet, well, they're all Italian-speaking states, right? And with that being said, they controlled a lot of the trade coming through. So anything coming from Asia, Middle East, well, it was traveling Mediterranean, it came through Italy, right? So like I mentioned, they're like the funnel to the rest of Europe, right? So what happens here will eventually spread, which we mentioned already with the Renaissance, okay? I know the Reformation is happening more up here in Central Europe, in parts of modern day Germany, but at the same time, right, the influence here that's sparked from Italy, where this all begins. Anyway, we did mention about this empire right here in parts of Eastern Europe. So we mentioned about the Byzantine Empire. Well, it's no longer there. Now it's the Ottoman Empire. Okay, so the Ottoman Empire, they also had a control when it comes to trade. Let's face it, right? They control the land route to Asia. And so if any types of materials or resources are coming into Europe, it's got to cross the Ottoman Empire or Italy, right? So I just want to give you guys a heads up before we move on. All right, so here's your bell ringer for today. Kind of get us in a direction moving into this age of discovery. Now it's going to spark many countries here in Western Europe to find a new route, to find a new country to depend on when it comes to trade. All right, so who do you think controlled trade through the Mediterranean Sea during the time of the Renaissance? So think about it. I know I just kind of talked about it already, but anyway, why is it so significant? Why is it so important? And for these countries here in Western Europe, they got to figure out a different way. So there you go. I'll just put Europe. That's important. There you go. Update a little bit there. Give you a better idea. All right, so I know I kind of gave this away here, but last topic here with the Renaissance, well, two topics ago now. But with the Renaissance, we mentioned about two of these entities, these areas here that control trade. And again, if you control trade, that means you're going to be pretty wealthy, right? And with money comes what? Power, right? Comes power. So we mentioned with Italy, right? They have a lot of this influence, right? They have a lot of this control. It just goes to show, I mean, if you have a good location right along the Mediterranean Sea, you can access a lot of this trade. And in this case here, what we talked about with the Medici family, they started to create these banks and financial systems here to try to develop businesses. And once that starts, well, it's just going to carry over, right? It's going to eventually enrich these areas to a point where they're going to start this new influence, right? And with the Renaissance, the artwork, the beauty of it, right? It wouldn't have happened without this trade. It wouldn't have happened without this access of trade to the Middle East, to parts of Asia. Right? We also talked about the Ottoman Empire. So as the Byzantine Empire fell, the Ottoman Empire takes its place. And we'll mention about the Ottoman Empire moving forward here. Right? They're going to be a strong power, a strong entity that does control trade from obviously the Middle East here, but moving out to Asia. So they control the land route. Right? And obviously they're enriching themselves, and they also have access here to a lot of the instruments used to travel the Mediterranean. Yeah, Italy's kind of doing it, but the Ottoman Empire were actually the more sophisticated means of travel and navigation. And those ideas are going to be implemented here in Western Europe. So you'll get countries like Portugal, who we're going to talk about today, Spain, England, right? They're going to adopt these ideas. They're going to take them and apply it to their own means to establish new trade routes so you can cut out the middleman, right? So the goal here of these Western European countries are to access trade and access areas that they could never before, right? They can cut out the middleman that they're relying on so much when it comes to trade, when it comes to influence, when it comes to ultimately power, right? So the Ottoman Empire, we'll mention about them. They were very successful here early on, but as we get closer towards World War One, the Industrial Revolution, they don't keep up, right, so to speak, right? They don't have the means of modernization, which we'll mention, that these other countries here in Europe do adopt. They do, obviously accept. The Ottoman Empire is going to be known as like the old man in Europe. But here at the start, right, when we think about the age of exploration, they're pretty darn strong, right? Anyway, with that, there's a lot of Muslim populations coming in, right? With that, there's a lot of Islamic movements here in the Ottoman Empire. So obviously that's a challenge too, many of these Western European countries. They want to depend on an Islamic group here, a Muslim group for trade. No, right? That's a problem. So you can see why a lot of these countries here in Western Europe, number one, want to receive their own power, but also cut out that middleman, right? Cut out that trade supplier to the rest of Europe. So that's important to think. All right, here are your terms for today. So this is a new topic, same chapter though. So we are still in chapter 2, but now we're on the age of exploration or age of discovery, whatever you want to say. All right, so we got Henry the Navigator. We're going to start here with Portugal. We got the astrolabe, the sextant, Caravel, Bartholomew Diaz, and Vasco da Gama. All right, so I know there's some names there. I did leave the names out before in previous years, but I'm going to put them in there because I think they're important to talk about. Also, I'm going to have an assignment here, a project, where you can talk about anyone from the Renaissance, Reformation, and here through the Age of Discovery, where you're going to give a little bit of a project about detail their life, their works, their fame, their significance. And I think that'll be interesting. I think it'll be good. So I'll talk more about this project here later down the line. Maybe actually I'll put it out there on Thursday or Wednesday. We can talk about it, discuss it, and then you guys can get a good start on it on Friday when I'm out. So maybe that's something I can put out there later here in the week. All right, so I'll give you guys some time, work on the terms. All right, so with these terms here today, we're going to go over and we're going to discuss about how Portugal is going to be this first country here to step out, right? And try to find a new trade route, try to access the riches, the trade of Asia without relying on these countries here, these empires of Europe, like the Ottoman Empire, and some of these Italian-speaking states, right? The goal here is to access your own trade, obviously with these riches coming in, you're going to enhance wealth, and with wealth comes power. Let's face it. Also, one thing I want to mention is that, well, religion is going to be another reason, another one of these movements here to try to spread around the world, right? So we just talked about the Counter Reformation for the Jesuits, the Society of Jesus. Their goal is to try to convert as many people over to the faith as possible. The only way to do that is to step out your own boundaries, right? So as Europe's becoming more of a, when it comes to religion and Christianity, as it's fracturing in all these different areas and all these different perspectives of Christianity are forming. Well, now, these religions want to try to spread it. They want to try to accept as many followers into the faith as possible. So that's another reason why we see this age of exploration happen. All right, so anyway, I would put right beside the age of exploration in your notes, your vocab, wherever, God, gold, and glory. Right? So these three G's here are a good example and a good explanation of why the age of discovery, the age of exploration took off. So number one, God, just talked about it, right? So as Europe's going through this Reformation, right, all these different perspectives of Christianity reforming, right? Especially here in England, what we talked about with the Protestant Reformation, we talked about John Calvin, we talked about Zwingli, all these different perspectives, the Counter Reformation, right, to try to reform the Catholic Church. Well, the goal here is to try to, again, expand the religion, try to accept more people into the faith. So definitely God, right? God is definitely a reason here why we have these countries in Europe expanding out. Gold, I already just mentioned about it. So with the Italian-speaking states here, they're controlling a lot of the trade through the Mediterranean. All the influence, the rest of Europe, comes from Italy. We mentioned about this with the Renaissance, with artwork, with culture, sophistication, you got it, education, but also when it comes to trade. So yeah, a lot of these countries in Western Europe, like Spain, Portugal, France, England, they want to try to find their own routes. They want to try to enhance their riches, their trade routes. So you try to cut out that middleman. Again, the Ottoman Empire is there too. They're controlling the land route to the Middle East, right? To Asia. And again, they're not obviously friendly with these Islamic faiths and Muslims here in this part of the world. So if you can cut them out, well, chances are you're going to become stronger, you'll be more equipped, and you can embrace and spread Christianity to other places. So in other words, the Ottoman Empire is really capping things here for the rest of Europe. Right? Any type of influence coming in, any type of riches and resources coming from Asia, well, they have control of it. Right? And let's face it, when it comes to religion, you can't spread it anywhere then to parts of the Middle East or parts of Asia. They got it controlled. So the goal, try to find a new route. Glory. So yeah, profits. Yeah, let's face it. So when it comes to achieving any type of success, when it comes to any objective, yeah, people want to try to pride themselves. So these countries here in Europe, they're going to try to expand their way to try to find new colonies, new areas, new trade routes. And yeah, these discoverers, right, these explorers, they're going to have something to pride themselves over. So obviously that's something important. Through this, we'll talk about it with capitalism, right, with this commercial revolution. Yeah, that's going to expand even more. Right, we're going to mention about how these joint stock companies are going to be expanded. And well, there's a lot going on with SpaceX today that when we get to current events. So there we go, current events. Blake, Patty, yeah. We can maybe talk about how these adventures now, not only here, obviously on Earth, but out in space. So that's a good way to maybe relate it to the lesson, relate it to this chapter. All right, so we'll talk about a lot of these explorers here through this chapter. Right, today we're going to focus on Portugal. Right, so it's Portugal here. They're expanding into parts of areas of the Atlantic that, well, no one really has done before. And we'll mention a lot of these explorers here, starting with Prince Henry the Navigator. Even though he didn't really go explore himself, he's funding a lot of these voyages. He's creating schools in Portugal to try to help with this expansion, using these instruments that have been used heavily by the Ottoman Empire and some of these Italian-speaking states here in the Mediterranean, and apply it out here, right? So we'll mention with Portugal, a lot of their trade routes are going to be focused around the coast of Africa and try to access trade here out to Asia. So we'll mention about Vasco da Gama here and how eventually he'll make it out to Asia. Anyway, we'll mention about Spain then, obviously here to the New World with Columbus, right? We'll mention about how this is going to instill many of these colonies and areas here out in the parts of Central America, South America, even moving up into parts of the Southwest modern day United States, right? Then we'll mention about England, obviously the 13 colonies. We'll mention a little bit about this expansion here towards the northeast part of modern day United States and parts of Canada. All right, so moving on. This is important. All right, so Portugal leads the way. So why Portugal? Well, it makes sense because let's face it, they're right here along the Atlantic Ocean. So as you're looking up here on the map, Portugal is a small little yellow country, right? Focus along the Atlantic Ocean. Anyway, so when it comes to the Europeans, obviously wanted to access the riches from the Middle East, from Asia, and they wanted to make sure that they could apply to their own marketplace. Let's face it, if you're relying on, let's say, Italy and the Ottoman Empire, you know damn well that they're going to put a tax on it, they're going to put a tariff on it, and you're paying extra for these goods, for these materials. Well, what if you're the country that, I don't know, establishes these trade routes? What if you're the country here that can bring these resources in? Well, then you control the trade, right? Then you can control the means of what you want to sell it for and access riches to a point of wealth that will create a power that's just unbalanced. And let's face it, you can cut out the middleman, right? You can cut out the Ottoman Empire, you can cut out the Italian-speaking states and focus your own wealth, your own power, and your own expansion. All right, so that's the biggest reason here. So we'll mention about Spain here soon, right? Obviously, they're going to find their other route here across the Atlantic Ocean, right? And then we'll mention even with England and how England, Spain, yeah, they're at odds with one another. We talk a little bit about that here with Henry VIII. We mentioned about his divorce with Catherine of Aragon. And well, as the Church of England's formed, that's not sitting well with Spain, who is, heavily Catholic. So we'll mention about these disputes, we'll mention about these rivalries. They're not going away. But the biggest thing here to remember is that, well, with Portugal, as they're focused along the Atlantic Ocean, right, they're ultimately going to be the ones that step out first. And they do. All right, we'll talk also about the Treaty of Tordesillas. Right? We'll mention about how this is going to split up the world, so to speak. Right? The old world, which is going to be in the Eastern Hemisphere. A lot of these travel routes around Africa are going to be resided with Portugal. Right? Anything out past moving into the Western Hemisphere, which we'll talk about with Columbus establishing these movements across the Atlantic. That's going to be the New World, and that's going to be prompted to Spain. So the Pope is going to make this decision. Okay, Portugal the old, Spain the new, and yeah, England's going to dive themselves in there, and even France. So these countries in Europe aren't going to just kind of abide by this rule set out by the Pope, especially if you're not according to their religion. So we'll mention more about that here soon. Why this isn't working? All right, so here's a pretty cool monument in Portugal. They established this here actually not too long ago, in the early 1900s, and this is a monument of discoveries. So on this monument here, which is focused in Portugal, pretty close here to the southern portion of Portugal out in the Atlantic Ocean, a lot of these explorers set sail from this point. And on the monument, you'll see many of these famous explorers, right? On the front part of it, you can't really see it, sorry, but if you guys look it up on your own, you'll see Henry the Navigator. He's the one who establishes these new instruments, these new forms of education and schooling to travel around, obviously, the oceans. They use the caravel, sex, the asteroid. They use these, the sun and the stars to help navigate the open water. Obviously, they didn't have GPSs back then. It's not like they had satellites, so they had to find a way to travel. Oh man, we're running low on time already. Jeez, I didn't even get to Henry the Navigator. All right, well, we'll start with Henry the Navigator tomorrow. We'll move and talk more about some of these other explorers from Portugal. And hopefully some of fame. Jeez, man, oh man. All right. All right.